Welcome to Moving People Forward with Mark Elfstrand. This program is a series of conversations on commonly seen challenges in everyday people's lives. We hope you'll be inspired by the stories you hear today. Perhaps you know of someone who would also benefit. Be sure to share the program link with a friend. Now, here's Mark.
Welcome, friends. Well, we hear a lot these days about comfort animals. In my book, the best kind of comfort animal is actually a dog. Well, on our program today, Moving People Forward, we're going to meet the head of a ministry that brings comfort to the hurting with over 130 canine comfort dogs. They also have a significant crisis response team as well. I'd like you to meet Tim Hetzner, who is the president and CEO of Lutheran Church Charities. Tim, good to see you.
Good morning, Mark.
Now, it just seems like your face, apart from the fact that I know you a little bit, but your face is familiar. Are you on TV a lot?
Occasionally.
Yeah. Now you're just being a little bit humble on us here, but the actual work that you've done with the canine comfort dogs has gotten a lot of media attention, and even on national programs as well, as I understand. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been on every major network. Good Morning America, Headline News. I can't think of them. CNN. Depends on what the crisis or the disaster is. It goes out there. So.
And now moving people forward. So this is like a real highlight of
That's
your
right.
career.
Moving up.
Yeah.
To move up.
All right. Well, before we actually talk about the dogs and your work with them, talk about your background a little bit and, just Lutheran Church Charities.
Well, my background actually started in parish ministry. I was director of discipleship for 25 years, 20 in my last church, and then got the call to head up Lutheran Church Charities. And that was, 16, 17 years ago. And have been here ever since. And when I started, it was myself and a half-time person. And it was a different type of ministry at that time, which with a little bit different mission of raising money to support other ministries that were serving churches in the community. And at that time when they started that years back in 46, many of those ministries did not have development people and everything else. And so over time they did, and they so the mission of LCC at that time had changed, and really, frankly, was not a valid mission anymore.
Oh, wow.
And so when they asked me to come and head it up, I kind of said, it's a sinking ship. It's, and they weren't in debt, but they were close. And it was kind of shrinking. And my predecessor had some legal problems and was in jail. And so I threw the call away. But then something told me that I should pray about it. And I did, and God hit me over the head and said, take it. So I didn't expect to be here that long. But and the board said, well, either flip it or give it a good funeral.
Yeah, well, when the head of a ministry is in jail, it does kind of make you question a little bit.
It does, yeah. And there's some little bad PR there in that, too. So.
Right.
But by the grace of God, I came in and established what I felt from 25 years in the parish, what was needed to help churches get outside the walls of their church. To serve people in their community with the presence of Jesus.
Yeah, so the focus, though, really has changed a lot
in the years. It's changed 100%. 100%. Nothing that LCC is doing today was part of the ministry prior to my coming, to be very frank.
Yeah.
So we don't raise support for the other ministries. We raise support to lift up and help move forward churches to get outside of the walls of their church.
Okay, so I'm pretty big on this idea that you need to have good values, core values in an organization. You've actually created a whole document of your ministry mission. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the details of that in just a moment. But first, 4 of these core values really stand out for what Lutheran Church Charities is all about. Just talk about those.
Well, our mission is to share the mercy, compassion, presence, and proclamation of Jesus Christ to those who suffer and are in need. That's our mission. Everything we do has to tie into that. The core values, I refer to them as the DNA of what we're about. And those are the things that I've learned over the years need to be in place in order to be a vibrant, active ministry, to be able to accomplish things quickly and respond to what's going on out in our community. So I established the DNA of LCC. And that can't be changed.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a few of those things. One that stood out the first time I met you was full brain decision making. What do you mean by that?
Well, my tribal background, my denominational background tended to be very male centered. And there's nothing wrong with that, but in fact, it's rather fun for males to sit around and make decisions. But most times they're not always the best decisions, Mark. So in knowing psychologically how things work, males and females think differently. And some of the best decisions that have ever been made that I have been part of or have witnessed have been when you've had input from male and female.
Yeah.
And so one of the DNA is that there are no decisions that are made, major decisions that are made at LCC that don't have input from male and female. So we're thinking on both sides of the brain. You also, though, the reality is that at the end of the day, somebody has to make a decision. And so in this case, it's myself. The top has to make decisions. Boards and committees and congregation meetings and all those things that churches have are somewhat dysfunctional, to say the least. And it's hard for decisions to get made, and it's hard for them to move forward. And so I didn't want that here at LCC. And I didn't want to have boards and committees and all that stuff. So I scrapped all of that, and we have a very effective organization of how we conduct ministry and make decisions, and can make decisions quickly.
Okay, so we have the dog part of the ministry. We also have the crisis response part, but then you also have what you call discipleship products. What's involved here?
There's three major components in Lutheran Church Charities. We do disaster response, and that came before the Comfort Dog ministry.
Okay.
In fact, the Comfort Dog ministry grew out of disaster response down at Katrina. We also have the human care part of that, and that's helping churches help families and raising funds to help them to do that. Dollar per dollar, which is another one of our core DNA, is that 100% of your gift that comes in goes out directly to what you gave it for. And LCC then eats the administrative expenses of that, because a lot of that's internet giving, and depending on what credit card they're using, there's 2 to 8%, and then acknowledging the gift and all that. But when you give $100 towards helping somebody, or to a crisis or a disaster, 100% of that gift goes towards it. Which was a hard concept. I think I lost half of my board of directors when I said we're going to do that, because they said, well, how do you keep your doors open? I said, well, I have to figure that out, but I think it's the right thing to do. So I came up with that we would have one fundraiser a year for ourselves to keep our doors open, and that was our 1231, Remember Us Last. Once a year on 1231, we ask people, after they've given to whatever charity they give to remember us. Based on that, we establish our budget, which is starts February 1st.
Yeah. Well,
so it was a real simple formula. And from 1.5 people, we're now at, 22 full-time staff and part-time staff and thousands of volunteers. And
well, you got a wonderful team, and I'll tell you, the volunteers who work with those dogs are probably some of the most service-driven people I've ever met in my life. It's really remarkable. Well, if you're just joining us, my guest is Tim Hetzner. He's the president and CEO of Lutheran Church Charities. The name of this program is Moving People Forward, and when we come back in just a moment, we're going to explain to you about the Canine Comfort Dog Ministry. And Tim has just come back from 2 very important locations with the Comfort Dogs, and you'll want to hear about this. It's just ahead.
God is our safe place and our strength. He is always our help when we are in trouble. This word of God in Psalm 46:1 says it all. God is our safe place. He is our strength. He is our help when we are in trouble. Whenever and wherever we are invited, nationally or internationally, Lutheran Church Charities' mission is to bring the mercy, compassion, presence, and proclamation of Jesus Christ to those who are suffering and in need. LCC is a ministry of presence, to be present with Jesus, to lift up people in times of joy and sorrow, in prayer, and by passing through donations of dollar per dollar to those in need. Through our canine ministries, we respond and deploy with boots on the ground and paws within 24 hours, often sooner, of any crisis or disaster situation we're invited into. Our LCC disaster response teams continue our support, both financially and with our dedicated volunteers, for those communities during their long-term recovery and efforts, which can be years. Disaster response teams also train volunteers through our alert training to equip volunteers to respond to the various types of disasters. LCC's human care ministries work through our churches and pastors to provide financial and in-kind donations, people resources, and emotional and spiritual care. We have strong partnerships with churches and Christian ministries across the U.S. and internationally. You see, for us, the bottom line is making a difference by being present. For people who are suffering and in need, with that mercy, compassion, presence of Jesus Christ. Thank you again for allowing us the privilege to stand alongside and serve others. Jesus and your partnership make that possible to touch thousands of lives.
Welcome back. The name of this program is Moving People Forward. I'm Mark Elfstrand. My guest today is President and CEO of Lutheran Church Charities, Tim Hetzner. They have over 130 canine comfort dogs affiliated with the ministry, Lutheran Church Charities. And these comfort dogs have traveled all across the country in circumstances that are really dire, and people who just are desperate to have someone come along and offer comfort and hope, encouragement, mercy, compassion, some of the values we talked about in our last segment. So, Tim, you just returned from El Paso and also Dayton, Ohio. For people who are watching this broadcast, we don't know when they're going to see this. But on the other hand, it doesn't matter, because you're almost every week you find these comfort dogs are out someplace performing this service. So what exactly do they do on these scenes?
Well, you know, every crisis or disaster is different. They go out in disaster response when people have lost their homes. The recent ones are shootings, one in El Paso and the other one in Dayton, Ohio, where you had mass shooters that come in and killed 20 people in El Paso and others down in Dayton.
Yeah.
So we come in to be with victims, families, first responders, call centers, which take a lot of the calls, police departments, fire departments, and then the community, and funerals, and one-on-one appointments with loved ones. So we're out serving the whole community and the hospitals that have the victims. So in El Paso, for example, we were there to be with staff as they were doing their shift changes, because they're stressed out. And many of them in El Paso had worked 3 straight days and just slept at the hospital, Mark.
Huh.
And so we're there as they're leaving, giving them a chance to just relax a little bit and be able to talk about what they've gone through. And then with doctors and ER staff. And then we were invited into the hospital. We never go any place where we're not invited. We're invited in the hospital to be with some of the victims and then with their families. And so we did all of that and continued to do that on a daily basis with the hospital there in El Paso and also in Dayton, the same thing. But once we're invited in. And so it's to help the people process what they've gone through. Each community, each crisis is a little different. You know, in Sandy Hook, when we're there for the shootings for that, you know, a lot of children, a lot of spending time with children and teachers and parents. In El Paso, you know, that El Paso is a unique community, very, very tight, family-oriented community. In fact, what I heard over and over in El Paso was, this was an invasion in our home. That's how they felt it. It wasn't a Walmart. It was an invasion in their home.
Mm.
A wonderful, wonderful people. And of course, they go through so much because of their location and it being a entry point from Mexico, and so there's a lot of crossover there. It's one of the major hubs of people coming in, and of course, all the politic things that get caught up with that. And they're there just to help people.
Mm.
And so it was a powerful deployment. As we had dogs there we bring in different teams every 5 or 6 days because of the dogs and of the people, and it was so hot to bring fresh people in and continue to serve that community. And we'll continue to serve that community even past, the initial 2 to 3 weeks. And so we'll bring dogs back later as needed, because to some people, processing what they went through takes a while. Particularly with first responders. First responders have to professionally respond at the time and continue doing that. But once the dust settles, that's when they kind of can relax a little bit and then process all that they went through. Yeah. And that's hard. Yes. It's hard for our handlers because you deal with a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
It's hard for, I think, some of our people that have been deployed out on multiple disasters. I know just myself coming back from El Paso, I mean, you still have flashbacks of Sandy Hook and every other type of shooting, Aurora, all across the country. When the dogs are not in crisis, major crises like that, they're out working in the community, and every community has its own small crises, whether it's a death of a student in a school, or it's a suicide, or a shooting of a police officer. We're out all the time. In fact, while we were out, we had 4 crisis deployments here in the Chicago area, one day that we were invited out with. So we keep deploying dogs out and so we can, and it's also important. Part of our DNA is that we never charge those we serve. We only go where we're invited, never charge those we serve, and pick up all of our own transportation, hotels, meals, all of the expenses with that. And we do that because people support what we do. We don't have any big grants. We don't have any grants. Denomination, federal, state funding, we don't take any of that because we're a Christian ministry. But God is good, and He provides what we need as we need it.
Okay, so while you're down in El Paso, Texas, or you're in Dayton, Ohio, meanwhile, there's other kinds of disaster-type events taking place, or crises, that you have another team out at the same time that this is going on. So tell me about that.
Well, it's the coordination of dogs and people, and where they're going to stay and all that.
Yeah.
So with El Paso and Dayton, those happened within 24 hours. I mean, we were doing the travel plans for El Paso, and next thing I hear at 2 o'clock in the morning was the Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah.
And so we had to have an invite in there, which we had about 5 hours later when people were waking up. One of our churches invited us in there. So we were actually planning 2 major deployments at the same time, and then executing that. But then having to set into motion executing the next round of deploying dogs and people out, because we know they could only stay there for 5 or 6 days before we have to give them a break. Dogs take on the emotions of the people that pet them.
They do, huh?
And so they need some downtime also, otherwise they burn out. And the same way with people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's emotional. With people, it's not happy and fun. It's crying with people. It's hugging people. It's praying with people.
Yeah.
But in the midst of every crisis and disaster, because people ask all the time, why, or how could God?
Yeah.
In the midst of every one of those, good comes out of it, and God works in those, and it pulls people together. It pulls people closer to God many times. And people that didn't know Jesus Christ many times come to know Him because of the craziness of the world that we're living in right now, Mark. Yeah. I'd hate to be a 16-year-old growing up right now when you have instant news and you have all the political and all the unrest and things going on. I'm saying this is the world we're going to live in. So you can understand that many times people of all ages go, I can't deal with this thing.
Yeah. Well, Tim, you've got really a magnificent team, and having met several of these people and love what you do. And of course, I happen to be a dog lover, so that helps me as well. And I want to thank you for giving us some time to explain all that Lutheran Church Charities does.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. My guest today has been Tim Hetzner, President and CEO of Lutheran Church Charities. You can get more information and you can support the work that they do by going to lutheranchurchcharities.org. And thank you for joining us. Next time we get together, we're actually going to go into more detail about the actual work with the dogs with someone who heads up the training part of this organization. So we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time for Moving People Forward.